We know as compliance administrators that communication is so important, and specifically during this time frame when you have a student athlete that may want to test the waters, but maybe they come back to school and you want to make sure that their eligibility is still there. And so what is the type of communication? What's the frequency of that communication between student athlete and the coaches and the compliance office? And how does the compliance offices really know what's going on, and what should they be looking out for?
Thank you once again, Angela. That's just some steps that I think administrators should look at. First of all, you just want to identify, you want to be proactive in this space, and you want to identify which student athletes may have interest in testing the waters. And so how do you do that? By having conversations with coaches and ask the coaches, hey, what guys you think, have they been talking about, the process this year? Or you individually yourself, hopefully you have those relationships with your student athletes to talk to them and see what their aspirations are. And once you identify those student athletes, I think during this time, as you identify, I think you should just meet with them on a month-to-month basis just to keep up to date with them. Ask them questions like, hey, has anybody reached out to you? And make sure you have maybe a checklist for each kid, like who's talking to them. Hey, have you had a chance to talk to your parents? Who are your parents talking to? Has anybody reached out to them about this process? And also too, we are expecting student athletes who are testing the waters to look at the NCAA certified agents, because if they want to retain the eligibility, they have to sign with the NCAA certified agent. So as a compliance administrator, I want to review that directly. I want to be proactive and look at that directly prior to them putting their name in for UAC feedback or before they put their name in to declare for the draft. I want to be prepared. So I want to look at that directory and have those conversations up front with those certified agents and just have a feeling of who they are. Because once that student athlete comes in, they want to have some type of information, and you kind of the first line of defense. They will come in your office and ask you about certain agents on that directory, and you have to somewhat be prepared and say, yes, I talked to this person, I talked to this person, these are some of my personal views, but once again, you definitely should go through a process, but this is just some of my information that I received from this particular agent. Have agents submit their information to the school. I'm pretty sure agents have websites and brochures and PowerPoint slides. And so just ask them to submit that information to you so you can look over it and help that student athlete through this process. I think doing this process as well is going to be that agent selection process, which we call the recruiting phase. And so you want to, once again, continue to talk to the student athlete, the parents, and the coach and say, hey, they're looking at trying to set up interviews. And so let's have these interviews, I guess during this pandemic space, I guess virtually. But in the new normal, you probably want to have them face to face. But right now, I'm assuming it's going to be more virtual. But have these meetings and ask those questions to the agents. And so it helps the student athlete and parents feel much more comfortable, especially because sometimes these parents are going through this for the first time. And so having questions prepared for the student athlete is going to help them make sure they have the right questions to answer, to have the answers from the certified agent, to make them help them with the process of selecting the right agent for them. And then once we go through that process and they select their agent, right, you want to make sure you still have that. I think it should be best to have a bi-weekly meeting, because during this space now, we still don't know how the combine and all that stuff is going to work, but you still want to have those meetings with your student athlete to say, hey, how's the relationship with the agent? What are they trying to provide for you? Because once again, you got to make sure it's checkboxing and make sure that it's within the NCAA legislation that the benefits they can provide. And so if they are traveling to meet with the agent, just want to have receipts, document things. And so what's going on, the ins and outs with the student athlete. And so if the coach don't know, hopefully you have that information to provide to the coach. And so that goes back to having that streamless communication with all parties that's impacting the student athlete's decision. And then also as well, you want to make sure at the end, you have that SPAC, you have those conversations. And then at the end, if the kid decides to come back to school, you definitely checked all the boxes to make sure that kid has done all he needs to make sure he retains his eligibility and come back to school. So I think the compliance administrator has a very, very important role in this process, because I think they're kind of next to the student athlete, they're kind of the centerpiece to this whole thing, because they're the most likely to be the ones that's pretty much will be initiating these conversations or these dialogues with the parents, coaches, the student athlete, and the agents.
And Angela, I would add one thing to that, and Derek's exactly right, and he's lived that world on compliance, so he knows exactly what that's like. And Derek and I work with our NCAA certified agents. We help administer the program, and so the one thing that we tell the certified agents who go through our process who are NCAA certified is to contact the compliance officers and the coaches of the kids that you're recruiting. I think it's important that they use that as the gateway. As Derek said, the compliance folks are kind of the gatekeepers of those student athletes, and they know what can and can't happen. And so we tell the agents who are certified by us is contact the compliance person, because it's much easier on the front end to know that an agent is talking to your kids or working with your kids than it is to find out secondhand that, hey, an agent's talking to kids, and all kinds of red flags come from that. So we encourage our agents, in fact, we direct them to, hey, when you're recruiting a kid, talk to the compliance person on that campus to let them know that you are recruiting one of their student athletes to possibly represent them through this process.
Yeah, and what you right on it, you hit the nail right on the head there. I think our compliance administrators, you have to be open to have the dialogue with agents. Agents are getting it from the NCAA. Hey, reach out to you guys, but you also have to. It's a two-way street. If the agents are going and trying to pursue conversations that you want to meet you guys, then compliance administrators have to be also open to be able to talk to these individuals. Because if you don't, and you cut the lines of communication, what's the next step for the agent to do? And so I think we got to realize this is going to be a two-way street, and we all have to be open to have communication for the betterment of our student athletes. Because I think each and every person who's in this student athlete space should have the best interest of the student athlete. And so it takes me as compliance administrator to have this dialogue with the agents to help my student athlete make the right decision to go with one of our NCAA certified agents. Then I have to make sure that's part of my responsibilities as a compliance administrator, is to allow that stream of communication to happen. And so I think I urge our compliance administrators to have that dialogue with our NCAA certified agents.
And I would say to the compliance administrators that work a lot with AMA, if you have specific questions about a rule, you can reach out to us. You can submit things through our SRO. We're here to help you. We want to be able to make this as easy as possible because it is complicated. But at the end of it, we are trying to help a student athlete.